Motherhood, but not quite as we imagine. Thought-provoking, refreshing, straightforward, sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, but always honest. Welcome to School for Mothers, opening conversations we all need to have, exploring ways in which you can be fulfilled as a woman, once a mother. Now here is your host, mother of 10, Danusha Melina Durban.
Hello and welcome back to episode 26 of the School for Mothers podcast. I'm Danusha Melina Durban, your host, and the title for this week's episode is Self. And I'm joined today with my special guest, Jane Wyker. Now, Jane is a Cornell University graduate. She's a former elementary school teacher and a pioneer in parent education. She opened her parents' school in the 1970s, and that led to her 29-year family counselling practice. She also created Parents on the Job seminars in the 1990s, and she was presented those in Fortune 500 companies and helping employees balance their work and family lives. Jane's the mother of 3 sons and 1 daughter, and is also a grandmother. Listeners, I'm hoping to ask some of the questions I'd usually not ask an 83-year-old woman. Let's dive into my conversation with Jane. I'm not often almost speechless, but today's guest is really rather an unusual woman, certainly in my book. And I think listeners know that I have a big range of experiences and women I know and people that I know and have worked with. And actually Jane Wyker is, and I hope I'm saying your name right. Oh my goodness, I've been so excited to have this conversation. One of the reasons is unashamedly that Jane back in the 90s created Parents on the Job seminars and was presenting these seminars in Fortune 500 companies then. And I'm going to be asking her a little bit about what she used to do. And it was all about balance, I think, and more in terms of employees being able to balance their work and family lives. I'm just going to have to be really honest. One of the most exciting parts about this conversation that nearly moves me to tears is the fact that I'm going to have a conversation with a woman in her 80s who's a fucking powerhouse. And you know, that's so moving. Oh, Jane, I've looked forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Danusha. I have been looking forward to it also.
Yeah.
A sterling introduction.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm just really, sometimes I wish that this show was a video one, because I don't dress up. I mean, it's not because I'm looking good. It's because actually I've got tears. You know, I don't really get the chance to. I don't think I've ever cried on this podcast, which is very interesting. I don't get the chance to have conversations with senior women like I do in senior corporate environments. I'm talking about women who inspire, because I know you've got this sensational book out, this amazing book, haven't you, called Soul Selfish? And like, you lay it on the line about your life. Would you just give us some glimpses about what you lay out before us, please?
I wrote this book because I thought that the journey that I took was so effective and important for me that I wanted to share it, to encourage other people to look within. I started my inner journey when I was 34 years old, and it changed my life. And I began to look at the person that I was at that point and how I got to be at that point, which was not a happy person. Despite the most incredibly beautiful external life, that there was not a sense of happiness inside of me. And if you had looked at my life, you would have envied it. It was just that beautiful as it appeared. So I am a stand for the inner life, because I believe that life is an inside-out process, and that we create our life from our beliefs, and that we have allowed and accumulated many, many beliefs from our childhoods that really do not suit us And so long as we carry those beliefs, we are stuck in the results of those beliefs. So I am a stand for the inner process and that life is an inside-out job.
Yes. Yeah. Now, did it take you more than 40 years to write that?
To write the book?
Yeah, I'm not talking about the process of writing it. I mean, what you started your inner journey on this, I guess, this recognition of the fact that the outer was not matching the inner. It was Soul Selfish, your first book?
Yes, Soul Selfish was my first book. And I wrote it because I know there are so many good girls in this world. There are millions of good girls in this world.
What do you mean by that, Jane? What's a good girl?
When I say good girl, it is with quotes, because good girl is a woman who looks to others, looks to give to others, looks to please others. And it starts very, very early when she's very young. And in my case, I had a mother who was quite emotionally fragile and an older brother who was quite a, quote, bad boy. And the attention that he was getting was not the kind of attention that I wanted. So this is all unconscious, that we choose our roles unconsciously. And we choose roles as children because we're dependent and we want our parents' love, attention, and affection. And so we do what it takes from the signals that we get from our parents as to what will give us that love, attention, and approval. And the key thing is that as children, we are unconscious. We are dependent and we are not conscious of what we're doing. We're just reacting to the outside because everything that we need, be it food, be it clothing, be it shelter, be it love, be it attention, be it recognition, all comes from outside. So we grow up to believe that everything comes from outside. And so I wrote this book because I wanted people to understand that life is an inside-out process. And to show you what a good girl I was, and how that carried into my first marriage when I was 24 years old and married to a very successful Wall Street person. And he came home very excited one day and he said that I have tickets to the New York Giants football games, season tickets, which were very, very hard to come by. And I would like you to come with me to the games. Will you come? And I wasn't really excited about football, but I thought, I have these 4 children and it would be a good day out and we would be together and we would have fun. So yes, of course I'll go. So we got to Yankee Stadium, and at that time it was the old Yankee Stadium, and there were pillars that supported the foundation of the building. And when I sat in my seat, I saw that there was a pillar that bisected the field. And I couldn't really see the field unless I took to the left of the pole or I moved to the right of the pole. And so I checked over at his seat, and while his was somewhat obstructed, it was nowhere near as obstructed as mine. But I said to myself, well, he's really much more into this than I am, so it's okay. Well, we went to the game 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And by this time, I was really into it, and it was fun to be there, and it was fun to go to the games, and the stadium was excited, and the games were exciting. And I was still bobbing from the left of the pole to the right of the pole, from the left of the pole to the right of the pole, from the right of the pole to the left of the pole. And I'm embarrassed to tell you, but it is the truth, that I did that for 10 years. I never asked to change seats. He never asked to change seats. Game to game, halftime to halftime, month to month, never asked.
Oh my God.
Yeah, what are your sighs?
Oh, I'm sad for your game watching. I'm like sad that you clocked that you had to adjust to, if you were going to watch those games, you had to do the moving rather than do that asking to be where you needed to be to have an unobstructed view. I mean,
Yes.
oh, I'm sad for that young girl.
Yes.
That's all. I'm sighing for her because in other examples of life, that's how good girls are, isn't it? We take what we're given.
Yes, and we accept that. And we're so used to giving and so not willing or able to ask to receive. And that goes on every level, whether it be emotionally, whether that be physically, whether that be in terms of sexuality, in terms of just time to be, that it is so, so important to see that just as breathing is an moving out and taking in process in balance, that all of life needs to be in that balance.
What happened when you, in that 10 years, at the end of that 10 years, what changed? I mean, with the pillars.
Well, what changed was the next big event was a turning point for me, was that my husband, this was when I was 34 or 5 years old, came home and said, well, I've done very well in my work, and I think I could take off a summer, and we could all go to Italy and spend the summer in Italy. And I'll go over and buy a car and look for a villa, and we can all go and we can take a mother's helper along so that you won't be burdened with full-time parenting, and let's go to Italy. Mm-hmm. Well, I had never been to Europe at that point, and I mean, that just sounded like fantastic. So I said, great, let's do that. So he did. He went off. Then he went off to Germany and bought a car and drove to Italy and found a beautiful place 130 kilometers north of Rome. And we came over 2-3 weeks later, all of us, 4 children, myself and mother's helper. And it was exquisite. I mean, if you had looked at my life, you would say, this is an ideal life. And we went to Rome, and we went to Florence, and we went to Pisa, and we went to Orvieto, and we went to Tuscany, and day trips. All of these things we were able to do in day trips. And it was wonderful. We had a young high school girl come in and teach us Italian. And we had an elderly woman come in and make us fresh spaghetti sauce. And it was just wonderful. And one would think, from this description, that I would have been the happiest person in the world. But I wasn't. I totally enjoyed it. And the external life was so bountiful and beautiful and interesting. But there was an inner gnawing all during that time that I felt. And I said to myself when we came home in the fall, that if I weren't just deliriously happy in that situation, that there was something that I just needed to look at inside of me, because the outside of me, the externals were so perfect. And that was the beginning of my inner process.
And what did you do?
I went to a group. At that point, there were encounter groups, and they were very, very popular at that time. And I went to a group. And the very first time I went to the group leader called upon me and asked me why I was responding with tears to another member's expression. Mm-hmm. And I began to talk about my dad. And there I was in my first group, expressing things that I had never even thought of in my life or related to in my life or even known were there in myself. And so at that very first group, I decided that I needed to go internal and to see what was really happening with me. And it was that experience that changed my life more than anything outside, because I just learned that life is an inside-out process, and that we create beliefs and we have stored feelings and emotions from our childhoods and decisions that we've made in our childhoods that we live unconsciously until we become aware of them. And the more that I became aware of them, and the more that I began to delve inside of myself, the more that I felt freer and lighter and more able to speak for myself, to stand for myself, to know what I wanted. My focus had been so external about what everyone else wanted, what each of my children wanted, what my husband wanted, what my parents needed. And there was so little space for Jane. And as I grew into my inner self, I began to discover, well, what makes Jane happy? And it's really okay for Jane to ask for what makes her happy. And it's really okay to create the space to have that happen. So it was a huge turning point, and it has continued really for the rest of my days to this moment, that there isn't a day that goes by that I don't look inside first and see what's happening in there. And see, was there anything that happened yesterday that was really beautiful that I want to treasure? Was there anything that happened yesterday that really bothered me or that unsettled me? Or is there something that I need to do to clean that up? Is there something I need to say, or something I need to do, or something I need to ask for?
Yeah, giving deep reverence and totally special place to yourself and your own inner process, rather than leaving yourself to last.
Mm-hmm.
Which is effectively what we're told. You know, whether we're told it conscious, like directly or not, all the messages are to live from the external, especially women, to service others before self.
And yet I feel very hopeful, because when I was a young woman, the culture was extremely different from what it is today. And when I was a young woman, the mark of being a successful woman was to marry a successful man.
Yes.
And today, what it means to be a successful woman is to be a whole woman. And it's so different. And so that I have great hopes that more and more women and more young girls who are being raised by women such as yourself will have such a different view of themselves and what their capabilities are and what their contributions are and what their needs are and how to meet them and what their desires are and how to move towards them.
That's at the heart of the School for Mothers. That's at the heart of this podcast, really, because we very rarely talk about the activity of mothering. We could talk about how to get more sleep, and we may well do that, for instance, because that's high on the agenda for most mothers of, certainly of younger children. But the actual act of raising children and how to do that, we don't talk about, but more about nurturing the desires of the whole woman, the woman beyond children. Yeah, I'm glad you're hopeful. I'm probably less hopeful than you.
Why is that?
I think there are persisting challenges that, oh God, dare I say it, that marrying a man, that option that was success, I think that's still there. And I think we've just added in. That's one thing. And now you almost have to have, well, it's not almost, you have to have this vibrant, powerful corporate career or 6-figure, 7-figure own business, as well as fabulous, functional, not dysfunctional, but functional children that are doing well, as well as frequent holidays that offer mostly your children extraordinary extracurricular, experiences, as well as skills such as skiing, such as, learning Mandarin, coding, all of those things on top of everything else, as well as, of course, being very fit. And one must look at least, maybe a decade younger than one's real age.
Sounds like a hard job.
I'm tired. I'm tired, even
yeah.
like regurgitating this out. But that's what I mean. That's when, I can also having date nights. I mean, date nights. It's not enough just to be married. You've got to have sexy date nights now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're so tired.
Like fire on. And fire on every cylinder, like everything.
Uh-huh.
You need to, and it's like, and it's not to kind of, dampen your hope, because I love hearing that you are.
Yes.
From within the experience, at the moment, it feels like we've added, rather than just find a man and marry him, do well on that. And then make sure you can have children. They'll be his children. Whereas now there are children. They're not his children. Men walk away often. And if they don't walk away, they co-parent. But they're our children. So we've won the right to have everything. But to do everything except ourselves.
But that leads us to our values and what do we value? And one of the reasons that I was so excited about this conversation that we're having is that I think that parenting is the most important job in the world. Without question, that we, in our hands and in our consciousness, we have the responsibility of shaping the next generation. And through all of the inner work that I've done and the mistakes that I've seen my parents make and the mistakes that I've seen myself make, I still say that the most important work that we have is parenting, because we have the most influence on the next generation.
Yes.
And when we hold that and hold that value, then we can rest more in knowing how we want to spend our time, what we want to prioritize. And yes, date nights are important. And yes, looking great is important. And all the rest of the things that we want to do are important. But when we begin to set up consciously, what is my value system and where am I going to put most of my energy? How am I going to prioritize my energy and my time? Then I think we can feel proud and good of the choices that we make. And what the world is saying is less important, because what we know within ourselves, deeply grounded, is how we're living.
Yeah, it's that decision point, isn't it? When we get really committed to our choices, then what others are doing really can be less important. Sure, I mean, society will validate certain choices above others, and that can be a tough one. But actually, when we're solidly committed to our path, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if somebody else is doing something very different. It's very much about authoring our own story and our own, as you say, honoring our values.
Yes. And that's where peace comes, inner peace comes, where we really know what's important to us and that we go for it and that we commit to it. And then our days are filled with what's important to us. And we can allow others to have what's important to them, be it different, and that we're still okay because we're doing what's important to us and they're doing what's important to them.
I have a lot of questions for you,
I'd love to answer them if I could.
Oh, you're a darling. Listeners, Jane and I have met very briefly years ago. I mean, like super briefly. So it isn't that we've spent ages knowing each other, although it may feel differently, but I just wanted to say that. So one of the reasons I was emotional at the top of this conversation was because, well, one reason is it's my mother's birthday, and it was the anniversary of her death not very long ago at all. But it's really funny. This particular birthday has really reminded me, and I think of her. And I think it's because the more I delve into the extraordinary power of being a mother, the more I realize what an absolute arse I was. I mean, just such an unforgiving little brat. I mean, I just, Jane, if I could wind back some of my more brittle, abrasive judgments that I had about my mother, who, by the way, deserved some of them. I'm not doing a kind of masochistic thing here. No. She was awful some of the time. Awful, really awful. But she was playing out her stuff from her own wounded childhood, as we all do. I got that many years ago, so it's okay. But as I've really come into a place of forgiveness for myself as a mother, naturally, if you're going to forgive yourself for your human frailties and your as unwise choices, either with what you say or do, then, reflexively, I have to look and go, okay, well, she was a human then. I can't really hold her as somebody in a different category than me. And that's a bit saddening. I think it's saddening. So because also I don't have many seniors in my life, I had children very, very young. So even though some of them are adult, I still have to have that matriarchal position, and I don't have anybody else in the family. It's an interesting thing about loneliness, I think, in motherhood. We recently on the Facebook group put out a piece about what's the hardest and frustrating and surprising thing about being a mother. And I couldn't help but be struck by the loneliness that kept coming up. Mm-hmm. It's just the sheer loneliness of mothering, Mm-hmm. And I think I've been saying to close friends for ages now, I just want a group of older women that I can ask those questions like, I don't know, things like, what do you do? It's a very live question that I've seen friends say recently. What's it like to become invisible? What's the power of being invisible as an older woman from a kind of sexually objectified sense? But what's the power in that? Rather than I've lost my looks. I'm not interested in that bit. If that makes sense.
Well, I really could relate to this because I don't have those feelings at all. I feel really as beautiful, maybe in some ways more beautiful than I ever have.
Oh, can you say that again, please?
I feel as beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful than I ever have. And so I think that so much of it is about self-love. And self-love is really what Soul Selfish is about. That the more that I have unloaded and released painful feelings, angry feelings, fearful feelings, the more that I have developed my spiritual connection, where every day I either journal or I just sit or I walk or I listen. I listen to myself every day. I call it inner housekeeping.
I love that.
What would it be like if you never cleaned your home? How would your house look if you just didn't clean your house? How would it look after a week? How would it look after a month? How would it look after a year? How would it look after 5 years? Well, we have an inner home, and every day we collect invisible baggage. Invisible dirt, invisible garbage, whatever. Mm-hmm. And unless we are willing to clean that out, we get so burdened by that, the heaviness of it, that we feel that, and that translates into the way we feel about ourselves, our looks, our lives, our relationships, our possibilities. So I have this practice every day, and it can be different every day. As I say, I could just take a beautiful walk here in Arizona where it's so gorgeous, and I just take a walk, and the sky is as blue and as big as you can imagine. And I just feel so protected and so blessed with that. And I just listened to my day. What was my day like yesterday? And what did I love? And what did anything happen that's incomplete? Is there something I need to do more about, or think more about, or say more about? And the more that I keep my inner home clean, the more beautiful I feel. And some of it is self-care, yes, about physical exercise and diet, which I do because I just really want to do that. And some of it's about beauty and taking care of myself because I really want to do that. And it makes me happy to do that.
And the it's more for you, that, Jane. Yeah.
Pardon?
It's for you.
And it's for me. And it's what I call self-love.
Mm.
And so as mothers, we're so into, giving love to our children the best that we can. But we are the models for our children. And how we are with ourselves is very much what they see and learn, as well as what we say or do with them. And even more importantly, it has such an effect upon how we feel every day and how we look every day and the energy that we have every day and the creativity available to us every day. Because the more that we cleanse ourselves, the more we have a flow of creative energy that can flow through us.
Have you ever done colonics?
Yes.
Do you reckon they're good? I mean, I have, by the way, but do you reckon they're good for cleansing?
I have done them. At certain points in my life, I had some digestive issues, and that's when I was recommended to do that, and I did that. And I did that for many years. I do it, I would say now 3 times a year.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny, just as you said, because obviously inner housekeeping, I mean, there's many levels of that, aren't there? From a spiritual and emotional and literally a physical, kind of taking away of that toxicity that we cannot help within our systems, our guts, just accumulate. And it's, the first time I had a colonic was actually, it was with my ex-husband. It was a very odd experience. We had a Valentine's Day colonic. I should have known I'd divorce him later. This is what we chose to do. No, we didn't have
that is different.
Yeah, that's true. Well, no, it was because there was no appointment available, strangely enough, apart from Valentine's evening. So we did do that, and I hadn't realized that, matter can sit in the gut for kind of 6 months from a meal 6 months before, or 9 months in tiny pockets of the intestines. And I was like, oh, okay. And so it makes sense. I mean, it's on so many levels that one can cleanse and housekeep, as you say. Keep your
inner housekeeping.
Inner housekeeping.
Yes.
And I'm very I'm very fond of a streamlined external housekeeping. I have a very tidy, a very, very systematized home with a lot of fun, but it's actually very tidy and very in order. And actually, I take a very similar line with myself, with my inner housekeeping. And I have a feeling that what you're doing is pointing to a really deeper and more, even more kind of bigger commitment to that than the house. It's the wrong way round for me. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you would bring this to listeners and myself, that inner housekeeping is far more important than actual outer housekeeping.
Yes. I can't emphasize enough how much I believe that stored negative emotion is the source of so much of our unhappiness.
Yes.
And
And
a
illness,
sense of
I would think.
illness and a sense of deadness.
Yes.
And there are many people that I know, and being 83, it's very difficult for me to find peers
Yes.
who I am attracted to.
Yes.
Because most of them, they have a different life. They think very differently. They feel very old to me.
And what do you do about that? Because I can imagine that there are women of your age and men of your age sitting right this moment as we speak, actually 3 doors down from where we are talking here, where I am in the UK, is a care home full of contemporaries who will be sat in a chair. They're sat in a chair. I've been there. They're sat there. Yeah. So there are your contemporaries in age, but not in spirit and aliveness and energy.
And I say that what we think, what we feel, what we believe has so much to do with what we physicalize.
Yeah.
And that the more that we can be clean within, the more, and I also believe that there's a very important aspect of spirit, which whatever religion or spiritual practice or whatever, that there is a level within us that I discovered in my late 30s, just through meditation. And as I say, meditation doesn't mean need to be sitting with your legs crossed. It can be music, it can be dance, it can be walking, it can be writing, it can be many things. But to go inside and to connect with your inside, and the more that you connect with what's inside of you, and the more you release what is toxic inside of you, whether it be your thoughts or your emotions, the more free you are, the more open you are, and the more creative you are. And I just can't emphasize enough the importance of this inner housekeeping in whatever form, a man or woman chooses to do it. Another thing, we were talking about letting go before, whether it's letting go of a marriage or letting go of a work life or letting go. There's also letting go of children. And I see that for some women, it's very, very hard to let go of their children.
Yes.
And they remain very involved in their lives and in their decision making. And I think that it's very, very important. And I learned this. It was really interesting. I've had many teachers, some psychological teachers, some spiritual teachers. But this teacher was my puppy. She was a Yorkshire Terrier, and she was beautiful. And I had a male and female Yorkshire Terrier, and lo and behold, they mated, and we had a litter of 4 puppies. And the children were thrilled with this. And here we had 6 dogs. 6 dogs and 4 children were just more than I could handle. But I was so enthralled with these little things. They were just gorgeous. But the time came when they're 6 or 8 weeks old, where it was just necessary to begin to talk about that we can't have 6 dogs. And my husband at that time knew a woman who wanted a dog, and he said she was a lovely person and that he knew that she would be a wonderful, wonderful caretaker of one of our puppies. So I agreed, and the woman came to the house, and she was a very sweet woman, and she chose one of the puppies and put the puppy under the lapel of her jacket and quickly left the house. And Lizzie, the mother dog, immediately knew it. She didn't see it, but she knew it. And this dog started running around the house at such a pace, up the stairs, down the stairs, into the living room, through every bedroom, through every closet, under every piece of furniture, looking for her dog, until she was totally exhausted. And I put the kids to bed, and Lizzie was still running around the house. And finally, she just crumped on the floor. And I sat on the carpet with her all night. And she sat there with her eyes open, and I petted her all night. And she just never moved, and I never moved. And that night, I realized that we all need to let go of our children.
Mm.
That our children are ours for a short period of time. In her case, it was only 7 weeks. In my case, kids were 18 or somewhere around there. But that we need to let go of our children, that they will be in our care for a period of time, that we give them the best that we can, that we teach them what we think they need to learn to go on and to be their own people and to create their own lives and their own families in their own way, and that is our job, to let go of them. And it was one of the most profound lessons, and to come from my little dog was such a blessing.
Yes.
And I just feel very, very proud that I learned that. And I, too, as you, have adult children. And at this point, I have 3 boys and a daughter. And they're all married. And they're all devoted to their wives. They're devoted to their children. They're devoted to their work. And I think that one of the reasons that they've done so well is that in my process, from good girl to soul selfish, I learned how to ask of them. That I gave to them, yes, and I will always give to them. But I also asked of them. And I asked them to help, and I asked them to help each other. And I asked them to participate in the household. And I see them now as they are, very, very much in there, doing what they do and helping and participating and partnering in ways that I think happen out of my willingness to ask of them, not only give to them.
Mm. It's an absolutely critical skill. It's not even a skill. It's a critical piece of raising a child, to not just give. In the space that I've been a parent, and it's several decades now, I've seen the pendulum swing from children in a different kind of childhood. And this asking of children has, I think, become less prevalent, less.
Yes.
As there's been a swing towards everything given to the child, shower the child with everything that she needs, and ask very little of, because they're a child for so little time. Whereas I believe this asking of children is profoundly important in them becoming an independent human being, standing not as an individual, but as part of teams, as part of society, of relationship, in collaboration with other human beings. And it's wonderful to hear the way that you're framing this. It's something that when people ask me, so how do you make things work? Well, I think their model is that I'm that martyr mother who carries absolutely everything on my shoulders and does for everybody, and then I kind of collapse in a little chair in the corner at the end of the day with my plate of crumbs, metaphorically, and I think, oh, what can I do now? Do I have a little career? Well, I ask everyone to step up, to be part of a system, to be part of our wonderful family. And we oscillate how well we can do that, each of us, including myself. I always have to step up, but, I don't always do it as graciously as I, sometimes I am that woman that's shouting, saying, I don't want to do this, it's all too much, that kind of screeching harridan. Not often, but it happens. So and so they see that we each have our place. rather than everything is a channel from adult to them, like they're this little person, and they're not. They're, if we equip them with the right skills, the right, solidity and values, then they need to be asked of. I love it.
Mm-hmm. I especially see this now that such a high percentage of women are working.
Yes.
And so that the family system is changing so much as a result. And a mother isn't home all day, every day. That it's essential to create a different give and take and sense of responsibility amongst the family members to make this family work, rather than it all be on mother's shoulders, given that she's not even there.
Yes.
And that I remember, I started my parents' school in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And at that point, most women were home, mothers were home. But by the 90s, a lot of them were starting to go to work.
Yes.
So in my parent classes, I was hearing a lot of stress because the other family members were behaving as if she were the same, as if she were there all the time, and she wasn't there all the time. And so all of these tasks and responsibilities were not getting met, and she was trying to meet them, once she got home from her full-time job. And it was just not working. And that's what just encouraged me to create Parents on the Job, because I knew this was just not in the neighborhood that I was living in, the small circle that I was able to meet, but that it was national and that it had to be addressed. And so when I went into corporations and began to talk about these things, much of what I said was this ability to ask your family, to ask your family to help, to ask your husband to help, to ask your children to help, to create bonded support systems with your friends and neighbors, so that when emergencies showed up, that you had fallback, that it was just a whole different world from being a full-time mother to have a full-time job and be a mother.
Well, I would love to say that the world has changed radically from since those days of Parents on the Job. And so School for Mothers, except I can't, Jane, because School for Mothers is right now consulting with major corporations on what they see as the mother challenge. Mm-hmm. And because actually the structures that land mothering firmly and squarely as the sole responsibility, it's optional for men, but a responsibility for the woman. It's not optional for a woman. And so actually there's, millions and millions. I would say it's not a national problem. It's now a global problem.
Yes.
It's actually become a global, an epidemic of women trying to do all of that. And because the structures haven't changed, even though we're trying to, companies are trying out with flexible working, and would that really help? And actually the very structures of relationships, are, well, for a start, as fractured relationships, divorced parents, children then are left as the sole, most of the care, much of the care, generously much of the care is given to women. And there are some extraordinarily fabulous men who do parent in a different way. But sadly, we're still, I'm really, actually, what I really want to say to you is, oh my God, have you still got some of the Parents on the Job work? Because I mean it, Jane, because you and I must have a conversation about this. Because I hazard a guess that some of the amazing work that you were doing in corporations is some of the messages that we're still having to say. And so when young women say, and I'm talking about women in their 20s who are considering having children, and they say, but things are different now. They're different. I don't know what to say.
I don't know how different they are, but I bring it back to the family. And I bring it back to what I said earlier, which is how are these young sons being raised? And how much is being asked of them? And how much are they participating in the family responsibilities?
Yes.
And how much are they seeing mother do and dad not do? Or how much are they being asked to cooperate or to take on responsibility? Or how little are they being asked?
Yes.
And what I see and I have a very small framework here, but I see with my three sons that they're right in there. They really are. They're there in parenting. They're there in house stuff. They're there in giving their wives time to go out and play and do what they want to do while they hold the fort. And I think it's very much about how they grew up, that they weren't just given to. They were asked of, and they knew that they were part of a team. And so when they had created their own team, they were part of that team. And I think it's something that starts very young.
Well, it does. It's very difficult to suddenly change that when you're an adult, because
Yes.
as we began right at the beginning of our conversation, we don't even begin to realize what we've taken on unconsciously in our childhood until we begin to unpack it, if we do, when we're older. And by that time, we're into our embedded habits and our belief systems and patterns of behavior that we have to unravel and review extensively. Again, if we decide to be that courageous, which thankfully many people do, and often because we have relationship breakdowns or something happens in life where we have, those moments where we realize, as you did, back after that amazing Italian holiday and that, that remarkable experience of bounty, as you called it, but that inner emptiness and that gnawing of something that wasn't quite right. And you took a look, you began that journey of reflection and healing and into soul selfish, to recovery of self.
Yes.
It's a profoundly important journey, and all the more important and deeply moving, if you haven't already realized. I'm saying from my perspective, and I've no doubt from listeners, that it's really, really moving to hear a spirit of a woman of 83, a woman in her 80s, you with so much vibrancy and aliveness that often women in their 30s, or human beings, men and women, don't have a patch on, do not have a patch on you. And so I really imagine that it would be difficult to find peers, age peers, that's all, because there are people in different ages that will, I know it, of course, but that's a different thing, isn't it?
Well, I have friends in their 70s and friends in their 60s and friends in their 50s. And it doesn't even come up about age. It's just about sharing where we are, who we are, what we're into, what interests us. And as I say, that I don't feel weighted down. Unfortunately, I'm very healthy, but I also believe that a large part of the reason that I'm healthy is that I've done a lot of this inner work, and that I'm not weighted down with emotional toxicity. And so I so treasure the opportunity that you have given me to express these possibilities for the young mothers that you work with. And I also want to express my admiration and appreciation for the work that you're doing with these young mothers from your very astute perspective, to give them a sense of what it is to be a mother that is not an indulgent mother, but a mother who asks of her children, gives to her children, and also gives to herself.
Just before we close, it would be absolutely remiss of me to not ask you this one question that nothing particularly hinges on it, by the way. I know I'll be kicking myself if I don't. Talk to me very quickly about dating, love and sex in your 80s.
Well, I am very pleased to talk to you about that because I have created a marriage that is so beautiful. My first marriage was really difficult, and I had 10 years on my own where I was raising my 4 children under very, very difficult financial circumstances, unlike the very affluent married life I had had previously.
Yeah.
And I did have a younger man in my life who became my lover. And that was such an important part of my life because my first marriage was not sexually connected or satisfying. And I grew into my sexuality in those years that I was on my own with this young man who was a really dear friend and sexual partner, and a man I knew I would never live with for the rest of my life, but was the perfect transition in my life.
How much younger was he, Jane?
12 years younger than I.
Yep, thank you.
And what I found was that my body, my connection to my body changed dramatically. And I just loved the feelings that my body gave me, the pleasure that my body gave me that I had never known in my first marriage. And so that was kind of a completion for me to connect with that level of myself, which when I was growing up was a very big no-no, and to just own it as part of myself. And I think that before you asked me about beauty, and I think that a woman connected to her sexuality feels beautiful and enjoys her body and enjoys her radiance and enjoys her energy and all those feelings that stream through her, whether she's having sex or not. They stream, the pleasure streams through her body. That is such a joy to me to experience every day, to be in my body, alive in my body. So that's something that many women need to work on because of the cultures in which we are born and raised and all of the attitudes about it. And that's an individual journey. But pleasure, sexual pleasure and pleasure of all kinds, whether it be the connectedness of friendship, whether it be the beauty of nature, whether it be music, art, theater, fashion, whatever, that we need to give time and honor to our pleasure, and our sexual pleasure is a great part of that.
No surprise there then, eh?
No, and yet we're so into our responsibilities and what we have to do and what we have to take care of that we put that last. And I think we really need to put that at the top.
Exactly. What a wonderful way to, call to action women to place themselves absolutely dead center in their own lives with pleasure at the top. Jane, thank you so much. It's glorious conversation. I'm so grateful.
I am so grateful too, Danusia. I have so enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Thank you. There's always a first, and today this was my day to cry on the podcast. Oh, well, at least I didn't wail or snort in your ears. Well done me for keeping it kind of together, almost. And Jane is so right, isn't she? Inner cleansing, housekeeping is the key to inner peace. I'm feeling all loved up by Jane's words. I'm feeling like, what a bloody special conversation. Isn't she unusual? Isn't she the ticket, the bomb, the pocket rocket? Oh God, I'll stop. You get the gist. I mean, what I really love about Jane is she's such a stand for us all honouring our inner process in order to be free and energised and to live fully, whatever our age. God, that's inspirational. It really is. I hope Jane sparked thoughts for you on how you might inner housekeep, whether it's through nature, mindful colouring, meditation, or another practice like boxing. Whatever it is, get down to that inner housekeeping. I know I'm totally jazzed about it. That's it till next week, when I'm joined by Vicky Pisarius. Yes, Honest Mum of bestseller Mum Boss fame is on the School for Mothers podcast. No doubt that'll be one big blast. Vicky talks for England, and well, I'm not so shy myself, so I think it'll be quite the episode. I really do. I hope you'll come and join me. Same time, same place. Meet me here. Thank you for joining us again. Have a lovely week.
Thank you for tuning in to the School for Mothers podcast. To continue the conversation and keep your dose of inspiration up, head over to schoolformothers.com/podcast, where you'll find bonus content from Danusha and her guests on habits, recommendations, books, best apps, time-saving secrets, life hacks, health, sleep and anything in between. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast.